Learn about Gemara. We are up to Masechta Moed Katan Daf Ches Amud Aleph, and we're 7 lines from the top of the page. Amar Mar. We're talking about Saras, that certain days we see it and certain days we don't see it. So, Amar Mar, we learned previously, and then we had an argument, we had Rav and Abai discussing which pasuk to learn out from, either from the pasuk Uve Yom Heiraz Boy, the day that you showed him, which means some days you do, some you don't. The Chassi you delay, Yom Tov you delay, and we learn from that pasuk. And Rebbe said we learn from the pasuk that when you have a nega tsaras on a house, first you clear out all the furniture and everything else from the house before you declare a tameh. So we see that we are saving. We are what do you call? So we see that even for davar shus, something which is there's no mitzvah there, we delay. So surely when it comes to mitzvah like Yom Tov for sure we delay. Okay, Amar, we learned before Yeshem Shataroi, but Yeshem Shataroi. There are certain days that the kohen goes ahead and sees, a certain day it doesn't. My mashma. What is how do you see? Amar Abai says, how do you see from the word uve yom heiros when you show it the day that you show? Where do you see the day is allowed to delay it? Abai says, Im kain lichter rachmana bigger, the vav. And what's the and? And is a conjunction to what? And the conjunction to, and if you decided to go, this is the day that you go. My ubayim and the day. That you have to choose the day. Some days you delay. Rava says it's not because the letter vav. The entire word biyim is superfluous. Kulakra, you say the word ubiyim is totally superfluous. Could have just said uveheiros. When you show it to the kohen, he will pronounce Tommy Atoy. My uvayim, the entire word of ayim seems to be extra. That days that you do see, the days that you don't see. How come Abaya says we need the word biyim? It's just a vav. No, he says we need the word biyom to teach you another halach altogether. You have to bring it to the kohen's attention during the day so he can make a determination. You can't do it at night under candlelight. It has to be out, has to be daylight. If Rava you says the entire word is superfluous, how does he know this din that you cannot show it to the kohen at night? How does he know that? Nafkale, you know where he learns it from? He learns from the pasuk where it says, L'kol mara eine hakohen, that you should show it to the eyes of the kohen. And in other words, no, it doesn't need a candle or anything else to pour it to help him out. He can see it straight directly with his own eyes. Since Rava has another pasuk altogether, L'kol mara eine hakohen, the kohen has to be able to see with his own eyes, which is during the day. Why does Abaye think we need the word b'yom to tell you by day, not by night? No, he says that pasuk mara eine hakohen is teaching another law altogether. Eine is plural, that both kohen's eyes have to be working. But if he's blind on one eye, it's not working. Just like we'll have the Gemara beginning Chagiga about a person who's blind in one eye, whether he has chayv or regel or not. You have to be able to see or be seen with both eyes. No, so Rava himself needs the pasuk as well for that reason, to teach you that you have to see in both eyes. He no longer has the pasuk teach you by day, not by night. So he needs b'yom for that. How does he say that the entire word b'yom is extra? The Rava now he also needs this pasuk for that. You're not going to be right. Well, b'yom with the another since Rava says the entire word b'yom is superfluous. So how does he know by day and not by night? Nafkale, he learns that because when it comes to a house, it says, you tell the kohen, kenega nidali babayis. It appears to me as if there is a nega there. What's the word li? What have the other word be? Li. So the word li is coming to stress. Li, to me personally, not to my candlelight. That was my own eyes, I saw it. Not because it was dark and there's my candles. Nuva baya, why Taka doesn't Abaya learn from there? And why does he say we need the word b'yom to tell you by day, not by night? What about the word li? No, ima hasam. I grant you that we learned from that word there, but all we know there is regarding a tumah of a house. A tumah of a house. Okay, so we'll find leniency at night. Don't worry about it. Tumah de gufe, but when it comes to your own tumah, which is much stricter, it may be there even if you see it at candlelight. That's why we need another pasuk, where we're talking about the person's own body has leprosy, that the kohen should see it by day and not by night. Okay, that ends the subject of leprosy. We're now going to touch a little bit on the laws of Avelis, but we'll learn much more about it if you later down in the Masechta, later in the Masechta Mishnah. Another thing Matter of Meir says, Melaket Adam Atzamais Avi V'imai, that one may on Chalamoid go ahead. They used to have a custom in those days that when somebody passed away, they would bury straight away, but in a temporary grave, and then they would eventually bring it to the grave alongside the family members. You're allowed to remove a body to bring alongside family members, but you're supposed to make a t'nai. When you put them, because we have a general rule that a mace is kindness mekayme, wherever you put it down, that's where it should remain, unless you make a t'nai at the time, putting it down on the t'nai. That means we're going to move you, when we find a suitable place. Especially as we say, we had to go back to the caver of Avaisa, to next to their family. It says, a person can collect the bones of his father, his mother, why? Because it's a simcha. It's not the time of simcha, but it is a simcha. He's happy that his close relative is now going to be resting next to the rest of the family. See, one of Tzara. Yesi says, Yesi says, the fact of the matter is, don't do it, because even though on the one hand maybe you have a simcha, on the other hand it brings out sorrow or mourning, and that's not the spirit of Cholamayit. Another thing is, like a person shouldn't arouse other people and say, if let's say somebody passed away recently before Yom Tov, a month or two before Yom Tov, don't go out there and tell other, hire a eulogizer and invite people to come along and to listen, and they should be crying then for their own mace. It's against the spirit of Yom Tov. You create a hesped. You shouldn't hire a maspid to be maspid within 30 days before Yom Tov. Why 30 days? We'll soon see. First of all, the ask a question. You're telling me that's a simchuloi collecting the bones and reinterning them somewhere else. Well, I'm a lakit at some of the that day it's like a day of avelis. Big machlek is the posture whether it's like you're an onion as well. Right before you're going to take it away, so you relocate it. That morning you took it out from its original place. You're an oinen, just like a regular burial, or no, you just like the first day of Avelis. No, you're allowed to have meat and drink wine. It's only one day Avelis, and that's it, no longer. But she's clearly Avelis. What's that Meir saying that it's Simcha? Says the Gemara, and furthermore, even let's say you don't, you're not taking it out of the ground. It's just sitting. The bones are bundled up in a handkerchief. Nevertheless, as long as it's not in its final resting place, you're Avelis. So some say every time you look at it, you're sitting in a state of Avelis. Abaye says, even without the addition of chizah, the question still remains a question. It's a day of Avelis. But nevertheless, a lot of times they bring in, extra points to make the question even stronger. And Taisa brings another opinion that Chizah is saying that you just said Avelis is one day, but if it's not yet reinterned, then the Avelis can last for a few days. So it could be a long Avelis. So how can you say Simcha? You're right that it's Avelis, but the Avelis of reinterning somebody, interning somebody is not the same degree of mourning when somebody passed away in the first place. So therefore, because Yom Tov, the Simcha of Yom Tov is that strong, that it sort of, in a way, eclipses the Avelis that you have for reinterring the bones of your whatever, your close relative, and therefore it made all the allowed. Loyal Mesa, what does that mean? My loyal Mesa, when they go ahead and they look for a eulogizer, the Marava, Amri usually say, Yifkun ime kol miriliva. Anybody else who's sad for any other purpose, come and join us, because it'll create a mood of sadness. Like they used to hire people, to come and to cry and to do and to say different chants. So they would invite all other people who also lost recently relatives who are in a very sad way. Come and join us here, and we'll all cry together. So the Gemara, we don't want that, because it's obviously against the spirit of Chalmud. And we say before Yom Tov 30 days, both of these things are 30 days. About being ma'oder other people to come and join you for your mace, or hiring eulogizer within 30 days. What's the idea of 30 days? So the Gemara, and why 30 days? We have two opinions. One reason. An instant with a person, 30 days before Yom Tov, you start talking about Yom Tov, so therefore he started got to think about Pesach, Sukkot, and he started to save up money to be able to be Oile Regel. Well, Basafton came along, a eulogizer, Ahmad al Pesach Beisai, and he stood his hand. So look, I'm a professional eulogizer. I go from door to door, see if anybody wants a eulogy, and I'm here. I'm ready. Do you have anybody passed away in the last month? I'll make a eulogy and pay me. The Nutlos and Ishta, the wife took all the money. She thought it'd be a big cover that makes to have a eulogizer. Took all the money saved up that they're going to use to the Oiler Egel and gave it to this maspid that he should do a eulogy. And as a result of that, he had no money anymore to go make his trek to Yerushalayim. So they made a decree, you shouldn't hire these people to come along and to arouse others to come and join you for a hesped. No, but then 30 days before. Why? Because the money, and even today, not Oiler Egel, but you're saving up money for all the needs, provisions of Yom Tov, and you'll give it away. Shmuel says, and so Shmuel says it's because the reason why 30 days before we don't want an official eulogy is because a person doesn't forget a mace for 30 days. And if you can make a hesped within 30 days of Pesach or Sukkot or Shavuos, comes the middle Yom Tov, you're going to remember. The hesped will start crying again, and it's going to in a way breach the spirit of Yom Tov. And it says most of my benai. What's the two reasons? What happens if the guy doesn't charge? According to Rav, the whole point is you use all the money. If he doesn't charge, he doesn't charge. No problem. Then you could have this happen within 30 days for Yom Tov. But the one who says because the ina mes v'shtakach, then even if it costs nothing, we don't want it hesped 30 days before Yom Tov. And Teresa would say the halacha is like Rav, that the reason is because of the money, and therefore if you don't pay, there's no issue here at all. And then Teresa makes the interesting thing that's talking about through hiring somebody else by free or not by free. But even according to Shmuel, if you this yourself, the one who's in a state of mourning, is the one who wants to make the hesped, of course you're allowed to, because Teresa's an interesting thing. Teresa says if one of the mourners make the hesped, it's unbelievable therapy, gives him closure, and it helps him deal with the pain, that the pain will dissipate a lot sooner. So therefore, on the contrary, if he makes a hesped, let's say within 4 weeks before Yom Tov, then by the time Yom Tov comes along, he already feels much better. He feels that he discharged the right cover to the mace, and so on and so forth. It's an interesting psychology. Taking about further, talking about mace, you're not allowed to go dig up a kuchin or a kvaris on Moed. The different kuchin and kvaris is in Baal Basra. There's a whole page talking about kuchin. Kuchin they used to have, and this is we talk about there. If you're walking on top, you have to worry where the burial was. They used to have under the ground, like underneath the ground, they made these, I guess, one long straight line, and then off that line, perpendicular to it, they would have a whole bunch of other little I'll say more, have a whole bunch of different slats coming out of it, and they would have 4 on each side, or 6 on each side, or 8 on each side, and then they would put in there the mason, and they would have their own. Each one would have their own little section. That's called a kuch. And kvaris, they used to bury people above ground. They used to put rocks like a little oil and bury people above the ground. So the way Rashi learned, you shouldn't do this. The way Rashi learns here, you shouldn't do this with somebody. You're just preparing it in case somebody passes away. People pass away all the time. If you're not allowed to do it on Chol Moed, but if somebody already passed away, then you're allowed to. Other Rishonim hold that even if somebody passed away, you're allowed to bury. Of course, we have to bury them, but not dig up a hole in the first instance. Yeah. In Chayfrin. Kuchen because it's a big tir. Aber met ganchin is a kuchen, but you're allowed to fit it to size. For example, you're allowed to make it shorter, you're allowed to make it longer if you have to be. Another thing altogether, you're allowed to make a nivreches on Chol Moed. Rashi learns it's a place for people to launder. They make these ponds to launder, but then it sort of doesn't fit into the Mishnah. So others say it's talking about they used to make a nivreches to be able to be matayir the mason. They used to immerse the mason in mikvah, and that's what they did in that nivreches. If the mace is sitting is lying in a chatzah, you're allowed to build the coffin right there and then, because everybody can see that you're building it for a particular mace, and you're allowed to even go ahead and chop down wood and make boards for that particular mace. But do it in the same chatzah that the mace is lying, so everybody can see the correlation. Not in one chatzah, build it in another chatzah the mace is lying, because otherwise people will start assuming you're doing work on Chol Moed for no reason. The Yehuda says, no, you're not allowed to go ahead and chop the board. You got to have the boards ready. Elin can yesh image, if you already have the boards ready, then you're allowed to go ahead and build a coffin on Chol Moed. Says the Gemara, my kuchen, my kid. What's the children of kuchen? The Kvaris. Amar Rabbi the kuchen bechafir. Kvaris bebinyan. Kuchen is on the ground, and Kvaris is above the ground. Time we learned Eilan kuchen and Kvaris kuchen bechafir digging on the ground, but Kvaris bebinyan building above the ground, and then within like an oil. Mausoleum. Aber Chanchin is a kuchen. Case in Mechan Chorim fix it up or mend it. Amar Rabbi Yehuda she'im haya aruch mekatz. If it's long, you make it short. I'm not sure why do you have to make it shorter. Let's say the mace, I guess only because we want to make less ground to be because you hover over the mess, it might be too much oil. But if it is, let's say the hole is 6 feet long and the mace is only 5 foot, you have an extra foot of ground there that is oil of tumah. But if you cut it down to the size of the mace, and only where the mace is lying is the tumah above, and not anywhere beyond that. And the Masnita Bryce you learned that on the other hand, if you want the person is taller than what you allow for, then you're allowed to extend it, or the person is bigger than you thought, you're allowed to make it widen it as well. What exactly the brech do bekir? That's known as a bekir, a little creek. What time we learned hani brech or bekir, we learned elsewhere, and then a brech and then a kir, which sounds like the two separate things. But you're right. You take it of kind of neat. There's a gia and there's a bar gia. There's a larger creek and then there's a smaller one. This supports what we learned. To take care of all the needs of a mace. The guys in like Sadi, a lot of shave his hair, mechapsin like kisses, a lot of launder his clothes, voice like odding, a lot of build them an ornament of studying, ham and studying yantif from the boards that were already prepared before yantif. This is like Rabbi Yehuda in our Mishnah. Rav Shimon says, "Af mevi'anetim." You're allowed to bring wood and menasa and betzina, and you're allowed to bring the wood and put them, and make them. You're allowed to bring wood and then turn them into boards. But basically, it's the scrutiny house, so people should observe, see, and come to all kinds of conclusions, which is not exactly like a Tanakama, because our Tanakama holds you can do it outwardly in your courtyard. If the mace is there, you can go ahead and bring wood and then turn it into planks and build an ornament. But the rules is sort of a compromise that you can do that, but in the privacy of your home, so nobody will have to see. Mishnah. Ein noisin noshim b'moed. You're not allowed to get married on Chalamoid, for sure not a Yom Tov. Lei besulas, not a girl who for the first time, but lei almanas, nor a widow, but lei miyabmin, nor do you proceed with mitzvah yibum, neisha simcha hiloi, because they generate simcha. And the question obviously is, what's wrong with that? Yom Tov is a time of simcha. Wouldn't you think that it's the most appropriate time to have a wedding is on Chalamoid? Everybody's in a state of euphoria, a state of ecstasy. It's a simcha. But let's say you were wed, you divorced, now you're taking it back for the second time. The simcha is far less. Then you can have that done on Chalamoid. A woman can make her tachshit in a Chalamoid. We'll see what that means. The Buddha says light tossed, she should not go ahead and put on lime on her body, and and makes it, when she peels it off, it makes it glisten, like I guess hot wax and all that. Because while she's wearing that, while she has that, there's wax in her or there's lime in her, whatever the plaster, she actually looks ugly, and also it causes pain. So therefore, even though the outcome is to be beautiful, but the means also has to be justified, and according to Rabbi Yehuda, the means are not valid, and according to Tanakama, the end justifies the means, and not only the end justifies the means, for her, the beauty that comes out afterwards definitely not just justifies it, but she doesn't even feel the pain to the extent, because she knows that this is all for the sake of beauty. A hedyed toife kedarkai, an ordinary person can sew normally, but a tradesman, because he cannot do professional work on Chalamoid, let's do it with a shindig. Umesargin esamidis, we'll see later more what that means. You tie the beds, we stretch them out. You don't tie them, you stretch them out with the bed, used to be made of ropes. We'll learn that more in the next few days. Says the Gemara, first of all, you're telling me that on Yom Tov you cannot get married. I don't understand. And you tell me the reason is because it brings simcha. So what's wrong? I forget the whole mitzvah. On the contrary, you would ask anybody, and they'll tell you, of course you should get married in Chalamoid if you have that option. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda said, Rabbi Shmuel, V'chein Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yishiv, others say, Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Chanina. It was either Rabbi Yehuda said name Shmuel, or it was Rabbi Elazar who said name Rabbi Yishiv, or it was Rabbi Elazar named Rabbi Chanina. Number one, Fisha Ma'arvin Simcha, the Simcha. We don't mix one Simcha with another Simcha. So you have the simcha of Yom Tov. We want you to focus on simcha Yom Tov. Don't mix in another simcha, which is the simcha of getting married. Where do we learn this out from? So according to Talmud Yerushalmi, we learned it in the Chumash just not so long ago. We learned that Lavan told Yaakov, "You want to marry the Rachel as well? Malei Shavua Zeis. Why don't you first complete this week of Simcha Shavurachas? When you finish with Leah, then you can go ahead and get married." So from there, you learn out to Yerushalmi, Eima Arvid Simcha B'Simcha. Our Gemara tomorrow is going to tell us. We learn out from Shlomo Melech that when he completed the construction of the Beis Hamikdash, they had 7 days of partying and then another 7 days for Sukkot. In fact, we learned a fascinating thing that Yom Kippur nobody observed. Everyone ate on that Yom Kippur. So why didn't they just combine the 7 days, the 7 days of rejoicing for the Beis Hamikdash together with Sukkot? So we learn out, Eima Arvid Simcha B'Simcha. And there's a big nafkamina halacha where you learn it from. If you learn from the Yerushalmi, Eima Arvid Simcha B'Simcha, then even if it's exactly the same Simcha, I don't want you to mix two together. But if you learn from the Babli for Shlomo, there was two different simchas. One simcha is called Sukkot. One simcha is based on Mikdash. You can't mix the two. But if let's say have two weddings of two, you want to marry two wives in the same day, according to our Gemara, it would seem nothing wrong, and that's how some Rishonim learn. Other Rishonim learn that it doesn't really make a difference, that you can never do two simchas at the same time. And the Mordechai says that for two, you shouldn't marry two wives at the same time. Taisus has a whole discussion. We'll get to in a second. Says the Gemara for that's reason number one. Reason number two is Rabba bar Rav Huna Amar. He says simcha shemeniach simcha zaregel ba'oisef. We're scared that you are going to leave behind the simcha of Sukkot, and you'll think about your wife, and you can neglect the Yom Tov, whatever Yom Tov it is. This what Rabbi Huna said is identical to what the Rav said, because the Rav actually learns it from a pasuk. How do you know you don't marry when you're young? It says, you should rejoice with your Yom Tov and not with your wife. Big enough, Allah will give these two reasons. What about other simchas? You want to have a siyum together at a chasna. Can you do that? Can you have a bris milah on Yom Tov Chalamoid if it's Leib's man or Pidyon Haben? If we learn Eima Arva Simcha B'Simcha, then you're not allowed to mix any two simchas. If it's good Samachta B'Chagecha V'Loi B'Ishtecha, then only a wedding you cannot do. But any other simcha is not an issue whatsoever. And Taisus has a discussion about if you're allowed to have a bris Chalamoid if it's Leib's man. Obviously, man you got to do straight away. But Leib's man, and he says that a bris milah is not really a simcha. A bris milah is not really a simcha because it's tzar for the child, and the parents therefore are very upset. That's why we don't say simcha b'mayna. So it's not simcha. But a Pidyon Haben, he says, but that how come I see people doing it? So Taisus concludes, interesting, and so does the Ritva other Rishonim, that the halacha is we do not follow Eima Arva Simcha B'Simcha, but rather the other reason Samachta V'Chagecha, which is a pasuk B'Loi B'Yishtecha, we find that a number of times in Shas. Yet if you look at Shulchan Aruch, Gemara Avram, and Tov Mavav, and other places, they all assume, in fact, even the Tur and Shulchan Aruch, in Ebenezer, they all assume that the Eima Arva Simcha B'Simcha is the final halacha. So the Rishonim on this Gemara here assume that the halacha is not like that. The text says in the bottom line of the page, and yet in halacha we do say the whole discussion about Purim. If you're allowed in your shalayim, if Tezvav Adar falls on a Shabbos, if you have the Seudah of Purim and Shabbos, and the reason Yerushalmi said you don't do it is because Eima Arvid Simcha B'Simcha, and you don't mix the two together. So it seems, and others say other that you could have a Seudah on Shabbos. And they're not concerned with that. And they're arguing whether the halach is Eima Arva Simcha or not, like the Rishonim argue over here. But what's interesting is the Yerushalmi that we are learning a halacha from Lavan. First of all, it's Kodim Matan Torah, and then from Lavan the Rasha, because Yaakov had no problem marrying Rachel straight away. In other words, he didn't think there's a problem of Ma'arva Simcha B'Simcha, or maybe he felt that Ma'arva Simcha B'Simcha is only if it's two different simchas, not two weddings. Like I just told you, somebody was trying to say, and Lavan said no. Eima Arva Simcha B'Simcha, even the exact same simcha, you're not allowed to. So here's a machlekes between Lavan and Yaakov, and halacha we paskin like Lavan, which is pretty extraordinary. Then you went further. Ulama is the third reason. You know why you shouldn't get married because it occupies a lot of your time. That you have to prepare for the wedding, and you're not allowed to work on Chalamoid. It's excessive because we had a number of occasions. And I said previously in Gemara. Is the fourth reason. It is so much cheaper to make a wedding on Chalamoid because anyway you have to have big meals and so on and so forth. So therefore, you're going to delay the wedding. You can delay the mitzvah puravu until Yom Tov, and we don't want that to happen. And once you make that a rule, we're not going to say, okay, well, if you already have children, don't worry about it. You can do it. A rule is a rule for everybody. So the Gemara, Meisel has a question on all of these that says you're not allowed to get married at Chalamoid, Mutarin, Lisa, Erev. You're allowed to get married Erev Yom Tov. You get married Erev Yom Tov, and even though your Shabbat brachas and your first meal will all be during Yom Tov, the chuppah itself is Erev Yom Tov. Everything is all right. Kasha l'kulu. I have a question on every single opinion here. Because the fact is the meals are going to be on Yom Tov. You can have the Suda, Yom Tov by night. It's brilliant. You have the chuppah like people do Friday night. You have the chuppah during the day and the meal Friday night. Anyway, you have to have the meal Friday night. Everybody's dressed up Shabbos anyway. So the costs have been reduced dramatically. Forget photography, forget all these other things, all these added expenses. So Yom Tov. So Yom Tov, that would be good motivation for people to do that. Get married out of Yom Tov and then have the sort of Yom Tov by night and the next 7 nights throughout the entire Yom Tov. And you say you're allowed to, but if how can you? If it's how can you? Delaying Puravu, you'll still delay it. And also the uluk, the tircha is the food. The chuppah is the easy part as far as tircha is concerned. So the Gemara, kasha l'kulu, like kasha. We'll go through each one. The simcha, the main simcha is the chuppah itself, and all the other days that you can have the shovrachas and it's not, the simcha is not in the same degree. It's not going to detract. We only consider ma'arva simcha. The and that applies to both. So whether it's it's not really simcha b'ishcha. You already had your simcha the day before, and the same thing with the simcha. The main simcha is the chuppah, and the rest of the simcha is not as great. It's not such a problem. The that it's a big bother. The whole tircha is the first day, the big meal, and therefore as soon as it's all prepared and done, so it's not a problem. And the mandam should bittul privilivia, the one who says bittul privilivia. So what do you want to do? You're going to wait till the day before Sukkot, so the day before Pesach. What happens? It's a rainy day or something. You can't have a chuppah. What happens? Something happens, and if you limit your entire wedding to one day, postponing your wedding for 4 months, and you limit it for one day, especially in those days, what happens if there's any delay? You're going to be pushed off to the next Yom Tov. Could be 6 months later. You're not going to take the risk. You're not going to take the risk and wait for one day. In fact, if you look at Shulchan, there's a whole discussion in Shulchan. What happens if you made a chuppah for a day in Hilchos Nida? What happens if you decide a chuppah on a day? And it seems to happen very often that the kala was delayed traveling or the chassan was delayed traveling because the roads are muddy and so on. And then comes 3-4 days later, does she have to start counting again, go to the mikveh, go through the whole exercise again? So it seems that it was very, very common that they didn't make it on the day. So why would a person take a risk and delay a wedding by a few months? Because he hopes that he'll be able to do that one day to save some money. Then went further. Okay, and that's finishing this subject, and then we're going to learn tomorrow where exactly do we learn this halacha from, the Eima Arva Simcha, and we'll leave it right till tomorrow. So everyone.